In today's episode, we have the very passionate Azure Rigney, who is a bit of a celebrity when it comes to maternity advocacy. If you can name a birth advocacy group, she's probably been a part of it. From Homebirth Australia, Homebirth New South Wales and Queensland, to Maternity Choices Australia, Friends of the Birth Centre, and so many more. Now mother of three, her journey into advocacy began after her traumatic first birth in the hospital. Her following two babies were born at home, and ever since, Asia has dedicated her time and resources to fighting for better options for maternity consumers.
So welcome everyone to the Illuminate podcast. We have a special guest here today, which I'm really excited. It's always a pleasure to be around this incredible human. So today we have Azure Rigney from every single maternity org imaginable representing the maternity space in Australia. So to go through her bio, Asia is a maternity advocate, maternity consumer representative, and mother of three children. Her first was a traumatic hospital birth, and her second child and third were born at home. She has co-designed academic research, given feedback to regulators, law reform, supported consumer reps at local, state, and federal level, plus calling out poor practice politically across various consumer groups in Homebirth Australia, Homebirth New South Wales, Homebirth Queensland, Maternity Choices Australia, Friends of the Birth Centre, and more. She is dedicated to maternity service reform, having developed human rights and discrimination training for clinicians and a complaints template to assist individual women who attempt to seek justice. Asia, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I mean, I haven't produced and filmed my own movie, but yeah, thanks for that welcome.
Well, you're in one.
You're starring in one.
I didn't put that in there.
Movie star.
Asia, you are instrumental in so many maternity changes that have happened in the last however many years. And I can definitely say that this film would not have been created without you, starting it all back in 2020 when we met at our kids' kindy. And from then on, you have just been like a driving force, motivating me to keep striving, keep advocating for change. Like, honestly, you're just amazing. We're so grateful that you are in this realm.
Thanks so much, Amanda. I have occasionally been constructively criticized for my use of acronyms. And I guess perhaps I could have explained what convener meant when you said you were interested in the convener position at Homebirth Queensland. But I'm really glad that I didn't.
I'm so grateful. So maybe we can start there. Yeah, honestly, because if you told me what it meant, I would have said no. And it's so let's go through the story of how we met. So I knew of you because we have the same midwife. And, you know, at that time, it was a reasonably small circle of people. And I remember seeing you come into the kindy and I'm like, hang on, I know that chick from Instagram, as in like from our midwife's Instagram. And I'm like, she looks awesome, like super strong powerhouse. And then we bonded there. And then we realized that, you know, we're both in the home birth community. And one day I had been attending the Homebirth Queensland support groups and in comes Asia and she's like, hey, do you want to hang around for the committee meeting after the meetup? And you just pumped me up. Your energy is just like electric. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not?
I'm actually not sure that that's how it went. I'm pretty sure at kindy you said you were interested in staying around after.
Did I? Okay, maybe I did. I was interested in the things, but I think, you know, you're just so supportive as well. Like you just made me feel super comfortable and like I wasn't out of my depth, I guess, at that moment in terms of just attending as a committee member. And so we're at this meeting and actually, Asia, do you want to tell the story?
No, I think you're a great storyteller.
Okay. Okay, so we're in this meeting and then they're electing positions. And so there had been no convener, which is like basically the president, right? Which I didn't know what the word meant. And you're just like, hey, you should elect to be the convener. And I said, well, I'm keen to be involved. And I had in mind like just an admin kind of person, like maybe I could do some social media or like, you know, I could I don't know, edit some forms or like proofread or whatever. And I remember Asia just saying, "Oh, you'll be great. All you have to do is read through some documents and just sign off on it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, is someone else writing these documents? I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never been in a committee before. I have never held a position anywhere close to that." But you really like downplayed what the role was. And so then I agreed, and everyone seemed really excited. Like when I said that, yeah, I'll put my hands up when the time comes, everyone was so pumped. And I was really confused. I'm like, why is everyone so excited? I'm just going to do like this basic admin role. Why? And so then I elected myself. And then everyone's like, yeah, we've got a full committee. Like we've got 4 people in the executive committee. This is awesome. So then went to Asia's place afterwards. And Asia's like telling me all about organizations and how they work. And it was just kind of like clicking over. And I remember stopping you and being like, Age, what does convener even mean? And you're like, it's like the president. And I'm like, fuck. Like having a panic attack.
And so this is so funny because you and I talk about informed and
Yeah.
what's that? Oh, affirmative consent so often.
Informed, educated consent, Asia.
Yeah, not just excited, not just affirmative, but
I was
really
excited.
evidence informed. Yeah, but look, you did it. And the thing
Yeah.
is, you're a woman, so you can do hard things.
Yeah. I was
But it wasn't,
horrified. Yeah, you go.
no, no, I was going to say it wasn't that hard though, was it, in hindsight?
No, it's fine. I think it's just because I didn't feel worthy of that position. Like I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And I felt like I was so passionate about the subject that I wanted to do a good job. And I didn't feel that I was capable of doing the job that it deserved, if that makes sense. And so I don't know if you realize, but when I left, I was fucking horrified. And I like made some phone calls and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I don't want to let anyone down because everyone was so excited, but I can't do this job. I cannot do it. And then, a night went past and then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I can't say I can't do it. So that means I have to do it. And then here we are.
I feel like you pushed 2 full-grown babies out of your vagina. You can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And with you around as well, like you've always been so supportive too. Anytime, like I had a lot of questions and Asia was just always the one I'd text at random hours of the night, like, what does this mean? And I remember Googling like every single acronym that you'd throw out and be like, I just park it in my brain and be like, what the fuck is she talking about? And then I go back and be like, oh, okay, that means like health minister, or that means like, I don't know, the other words. I still don't
In
really.
full in full disclosure, you were actually fantastic in political meetings, fantastic in meetings with the department. And so you're playing it super cool here. Like your research has paid off. And thanks for saying that I've inspired you.
You have. And because you prepped me for those meetings as well. So,
Let's add
there.
prepper to the bio.
Yeah. Oh yeah, seriously, Age. Like I'm so grateful because I wouldn't have been along this trajectory if it wasn't for you, honestly. You're just like a powerhouse. And how did you get into maternity, Asia?
Yeah, also by accident, someone saying to me when I'm pregnant, oh, join Homebirth New South Wales. I'm like, okay, not realizing how political access to homebirth was. And that's how it all started. I started just like all these other women who contact me, accidentally emailing a state-based issue to a federal MP or emailing a federal issue to a state MP. So I made all of those mistakes as well. Being given the roundabout by a hospital who doesn't want to adhere to the law. And I guess I've just used that experience, spoken to others, read the research, and have learned that you just need to keep on top of them every single week. So did you get my last email? Learn to harass the people in charge, and they'll eventually give you a little inch. And that, friends, is how we have finally got publicly funded home birth here in Queensland, through, decades of advocacy and research and networking and everyone playing their little part. It might seem like the MP is not listening to you, doesn't want to support what you're asking for, but they obviously go to their party's caucus, have a discussion, and that's how we've had a few small improvements over the last few years.
Did you ever feel overwhelmed with the amount of information and statistics and acronyms and, just that thought of how can I make a difference? It's too overwhelming. I don't know if I can do it. Did you ever have that, or were you just so passionate that you just kept moving forward and got to where you are now?
No, absolutely. And it was when, I'd been in meetings with obstetricians who would say, oh, no, but, that's a risk factor. Or, oh, the World Health Organization didn't mean that only 10% of women actually need to have a cesarean, and any more than that does more harm than good. I would then have to come back to them with some stats that were, super reputable. Um, and I felt it was really hard to collect because I'm not super academic. And so that's why I've started, getting some dot points together, making a few infographics, because that's sort of how I learn. And especially being a busy mom, I've found that, yeah, women have found that to be helpful as well. Also, something I tell women all the time, Amanda obviously extremely confident and was able to talk to her local state MP with only a little bit of prepping. But often I'll say to the women, look, if you don't want to speak on the Zoom, you can just turn the microphone off and I'm happy to sort of run the meeting. But you being there means that I get access to that politician. So even if the woman only wants to contribute in that small way by using her name and address to get us access, that's how I've been able to have some really actually fantastic meetings.
That's so good
Is
because I
that
can, yeah. Oh, no, you go, Amanda.
I was just thinking because a big thing for me was like, how do we do it? Like we want, what we want, how do we do it? And it seems like access to MPs is a really good way for just the general population, like home birth population, to provide feedback. Do you think that's the most effective way, other than, the other stuff that's politically going on at the moment? Like, is it a good idea for women to organise an appointment with their MP?
Yeah, absolutely. But I would also try and do media if possible and try and go to the local public hospital and say, look, you don't run a publicly funded home birth, or you do, but it's too restrictive. I couldn't access it for these reasons, whether it was geographical or biomedical risk factor. And we know that the risk factors are pretty sketchy,
Mm.
like such poor evidence. And so that's a great opportunity when the woman could bring an advocate or a researcher. And often, if the research is just too over my head, especially some of this health economic stuff, I'll bring the health economist with us. I'll bring the author of that research paper to the meeting. Now, look, they are too busy to probably send out their research and do these, bulk emails to politicians. And so that's why I just think we work so well together, where, I'll do some of that legwork and then the researcher just comes in for the half an hour meeting and explains it in a better way that I can. And then I just wrap up the meeting saying, this is why it's important to women and this is what we want you to do about it. And so, yeah, even though I'm not the smartest person in the room at any point in time, I do think that that ability to network has been pretty helpful.
How many people do you think we would need to make a real difference in the space? Like, are we talking about, 5,000 women? Are we talking about 10,000? Like, how much of an influence can we have, and how many people do we need?
If we had one woman in each state and federal electorate go to their state and federal MP, say within the same month, I think that would be incredible. So on average, say there's 100 MPs per state, and there's probably 200 in the federal government, and there's probably 100 per state in state government. That that would be a game changer. What I find really interesting at Labor and Liberal don't have maternal health policies in their election platforms, yet they'll have things on, climate and abortion and these other important issues. However, it's always maternity that's left off. And I think that would be critical. Another part of the puzzle is that the sort of mainstream feminists do not talk about this issue. And if they do, it's very bland. They might say continuity of care once, but they would never say continuity of midwifery carer and bodily autonomy in all places of birth centre, home birth, and hospital. And I think that is also a shame. The fact that the health system is so complicated in terms of how it's funded, part being federally, part being state, but our constitution doesn't allow the state to tie the federal government to tie their funding that they're giving to the state public hospitals to outcomes or to models of care. There are so many intricacies. Like in Queensland, we've got this Queensland birth strategy, and it really is fantastic with these brilliant targets. In 5 years, we're aiming to have 80% of women have access to a known midwife. And yeah, that target is not in service agreements, and the hospitals won't be fined if they don't meet their targets currently. And so I really do think that's the next step for lobbying, because we do have this fantastic document that Amanda, you and I have been involved with co-designing with the state government, and is probably the best consultation process I've ever been part of. Fingers crossed over the next few months, MCA and Homebirth Australia and MCN have been invited to the professional indemnity insurance consultation, and that will be talking about what private midwives can and can't support. And obviously, all of the maternity organisations in Australia support exactly what New Zealand has, and that is a no-fault insurance product where it's subsidised by the federal government, and all women have access to all models of care and all places of birth, regardless of risk status, because at no point should a woman be told by the federal government or an insurance product who can and can't home birth with a registered midwife.
Yeah, it's so important. I love that saying, like, insurance doesn't make birth safer. And it's just so true.
Yeah.
It's not about, it's political, isn't it? It's not about women's safety, this whole issue that's going on about the insurance at the moment. Did you want to talk a little bit more on what's going on in that space, Asia?
Yeah, well, I've got to say, we don't know who has asked for it, because it certainly hasn't been part of any of the meetings that I've been part of with government, where they've said, oh, we're doing a whole bunch of research. And we've said, oh, hang on a second. We haven't asked for that. What we've asked for is the Practicing Midwives 2018 reference group report was fantastic. And it talked about how endorsed midwives are really the way of the future. And it said that there should be a Medicare rebate for home birth for category A and B women. Now, obviously, it should also be for category C women. Why should, if you have a baby at 42 weeks plus 1 day, you don't get an $800 rebate from Medicare. But if you have the baby 36 hours before, you do get a Medicare rebate.
It's so stupid.
Oh, isn't it?
Doesn't make sense.
So I would actually, on that issue, I would actually love to support a woman who has a private midwife with visiting rights to a public hospital, who says that she intended on giving birth in the hospital with her endorsed midwife, but the baby came quickly at home and she didn't want to transfer after having the baby. Usually they give you a 6-hour period, and if you transfer within that 6-hour period to hospital, even though everything's gone totally fine, then you can get a rebate. I would actually love if a woman, let me support her, and we did a Commonwealth claim for defective administration, because I've read a few past cases, and I think this could be a way to go for advocacy, other than the media and the political lobbying, and then the lobbying the hospitals and the state health departments. I wonder if we could use this mechanism, and I wonder if we would be successful, because from what I've read, it is a defective administration of policy. It is not an ethical thing to give someone an $800 rebate 36 hours previously.
Yeah.
Just as an example.
They don't need it.
Yeah.
And $800 is a lot of money too. Like, for someone who's paid for private midwifery care, $800 rebate is significant, especially with cost of living, all the things.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we know that having a home birth is absolutely a return on investment for the government, safer, cheaper choice, the longitudinal outcomes for the baby up to two. And I think the health economists right now are working on a study showing the longitudinal health outcomes and costs associated with poor health for government funders up to 16. So we'll be able to see,
Wow.
even by planning a home birth, regardless of where your baby is actually born, the government can save money and your baby can be
Mm.
healthier.
It's just a no-brainer, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of the professional indemnity insurance, the submission is due on the 12th of August, and obviously all the key groups are doing up their submissions currently. But what Homebirth Australia has done is a survey of about 6,000 women and midwives, um, and the results, they haven't been published yet. But if I could just say that maybe 55% of women said that they would lie to their maternity care provider, their known midwife, their private midwife, who they've paid about 7.5 grand to, in order to access that home birth, so that they can still have one as of next year once this insurance product is apparently going to be up and running, and the exemption will apparently run out for category C women. And I find that fascinating because that, if anything, is that not more unsafe than what we're currently doing, which is just maximally supporting category C women? Because 60 to 80% of privately practicing midwives take on category B and C women. That's most of their clientele. And I do have to wonder, is this the government intentionally undermining privately practicing midwives because the rates have risen significantly over COVID? Not just midwives not wanting to birth in the not wanting to work in the system, but also the women. There's more women wanting to home birth privately now over the last few years. So that's why the midwives are wanting to meet that demand, and to the point where so many midwives every month are saying, look, I can't take you on, my books are full. And so then what are women doing? Free birthing with an unregistered doula. They might feel coerced into a hospital birth. And we know that when a woman has more bodily autonomy, she has better outcomes. Yes, it's not good.
And so just
What do you
for,
think?
I was just going to say, just for people that are listening that sort of aren't on top of all of the, as you said, like, the shorthand, like category A, B, and C, can you just give a rough idea of what they would mean? Like who would fall into those categories?
So category A is like extremely low risk, almost like no women are category A. So like if you sneeze, you could be category B. No, I'm joking. But if you have anxiety, depression, you're a lesbian, you have MTHFR, you've had a urinary tract infection in first trimester of your pregnancy, like just it's not good evidence. And it certainly was never intended to be about place of birth. It was just always about, a midwife scope and when it might be a good idea to offer a woman a referral to someone else, whether it's a obstetrician, psychologist, dietitian. And it shouldn't be used to control women or midwives working within their scope. And we know that endorsed midwives who have postgraduate education, they have pharmacology studies, they have, advanced neonatal resuscitation. They just don't need to be outsourcing willy-nilly. But right now, women can decline those unwarranted referrals and continue accessing their ideal model of care in place of birth. So yeah, we don't want to see that change. Category C would be, twins, breech, over 42 weeks, a past postpartum hemorrhage, even though that postpartum hemorrhage in the past could have been caused by the hospital. Yeah, so look, there's just so many issues, and the consultation time that the government has given us is not enough to go through such huge issues like this and rewrite this document. But at the end of the day, regardless of the categories A, B, and C and whether they will change or stay the same, it just shouldn't be a low risk product. It should be all women. And the word risk just should not be used in politics, insurance, funding. It just should not be used. Even in one-to-one care with women, we really probably shouldn't be using the word risk.
And so at the moment, Asia, just to be clear, like about the differences for people that don't know, at the moment we have a temporary, what do you call it? Exemption for insurance for birth, because there's no insurance for birth. And so at the moment, if you are category B, which most women are, you perhaps BC, I think is breach. So those women, they're able to continue care with a midwife who can practice within their scope and has the skills to support that woman. And so to get away with it, basically, they can say,
They
I
just
have referred.
document it.
They document it and they can
Or
say,
just
I've offered
say,
a referral, and they've declined.
yeah, offered
Yeah.
and declined. I love this language because in hospital, oh, all of a sudden you're having twins, so you must see an obstetrician. Well, hang on a second. There's no must nowhere in health practitioner law and Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare Standard 2 for consumer engagement legislation. Nowhere does it say, or even what's another fantastic Australian Charter of Healthcare Rights? Nowhere does it say a consumer must do anything in order to access healthcare. And here in Queensland, we actually just have the Queensland Human Rights Act 2019, and it's fantastic because Section 37 states that we should be able to access healthcare free from discrimination. I noticed that men who have a high BMI are not restricted from their choice in having a vasectomy, even though it may carry more risk than a man with a healthy BMI. And yet here we are restricting women with a high BMI from having a water birth in a hospital. And so my view is that maternity policies and legislation are based on sex discrimination. And unfortunately, in certain states, we actually can't make complaints to the Human Rights or the Discrimination Commission because certain states say that you have to have a comparator, and yet only women give birth. So there's no other sex comparator to then say, well, this would never happen in men's reproductive health services. And that's, I think, how they've gotten away with it for so long. But also, these women who have been traumatized and discriminated against, it's a difficult process to go through these legal systems. And that's why we have the anti-discrimination commissions and human rights commissions in select states and federally as well, is because then there's no cost to the complainant. However, it's still a lengthy process. And to go through to the next level, QCAT, for example, and the next level after that, the Supreme Court. And then if the woman making a complaint loses, then she might have to pay the other side's cost. And, between Crown Law and private barristers' fees for the other side, and government has plenty of resources, that could put the woman bankrupt. And so I understand why women historically have not utilized the existing legislation that we have. Recently, we've started supporting women to actually go to the police to talk about making a complaint for say a vaginal exam without consent, or touching the breasts without consent, anal exams, all these sorts of things. And I have to wonder if that might speed up the process for obstetric violence complaints. Anyway, we're getting a little bit off topic from home birth here, but like you and I always say, you can't talk about home birth without talking about how horrible the maternity system is, and then you can't talk about how horrible the maternity system is without comparing to best practice, which is home birth.
And so moving forward, if I know there's consultation occurring really soon, and hopefully we will be able to influence a better insurance product for home birth midwives. What will that look like? Because the current proposal, it looks like there will be restrictions around those women in the categories B and C. So will midwives be able to make a referral and say that the woman's declined and continue care, or will it have to be signed off to continue care by an obstetrician?
Yeah, well, I guess that's what the consultation will hash out, if it will be a further restriction on current practice, which is offer but decline, document it, carry on care, or whether there really will need to be a referral to, you know, the powers that be, whether that is an obstetrician or a dietitian. And just the whole thing is ridiculous because, again, none of those people have any experience with home birth. They can't determine what is safe. And remember, the National Maternity Strategy has 4 key things: choice, respect, access, and safety. But the definition of safety is physically and emotionally safe. So we cannot say we're having a safe birth if an obstetrician says, think you can have a safe birth in hospital. But if the woman doesn't feel safe, that is not a safe birth, according to the national strategy. But I would also just add, look, it may be that this insurance product is inevitable. And hopefully, we can get these changes through so it is, all risk and heavily subsidized so it doesn't impact midwives' practice and therefore passing on the additional costs to women. But we'd really like to see an actual decent amount of time for consultation. Right now, women who are getting pregnant this month may be impacted by this, removal of the exemption that's been in place for essentially 15 years. And that's not okay. Women need to know what they're getting into while they're still trying to conceive, and 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. So, women really do deserve to know. So I would be asking for another couple of years worth of consultation. A permanent exemption might also be another way to go. Or even a semi-permanent, even rather than like every 2 years and ongoing. What about, 5-yearly? So that way we've got 5 years to really sort this out. But I just think at the end of the day, if New Zealand is able to do it, why can't we?
100%. That's so important, those points about safety. Because safety is just such a independent thing. Everyone's safety looks differently. You can't just say this is safe and this is not. It's not that black and white in birth. There's just so many variables that need to be considered and so individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Some women say to me they would rather be raped at any other point in their life than when they're giving birth. And another woman said, everything that had been done to her, and so many bad things were done to her. But she said the worst thing, absolute worst thing for her was they cut the baby's cord before it had stopped pulsating when she had been so clear about delayed cord clamping. And, there was no medical reason as well. And she just said that to her was just the worst possible thing. Other women had said, they'd been violently raped by a man who was in jail, and the jail, the court process, everything was really hard, not downplaying that at all. She did say it was really hard. But when a stranger midwife, put her fingers into her bottom prior to giving birth, that was actually so much worse, not just physically, but this woman is extremely intelligent, and she just knew, well, hang on, I have no real repercussions. There's no way that midwife is going to jail. And she said that was worse than her previous experience of sexual assault. I would really like it if all the feminists and NGOs within the social services sector would start talking about domestic family sexual violence. So they're already talking about DFSV. I would really appreciate if they started adding O before that NV, so domestic, family, sexual, obstetric violence, because 85% of women give birth. And it's not about, I guess I have come up with a few examples of physical, interpersonal obstetric violence, especially around consent and intimate areas. But a lot of women also talk about the systemic obstetric violence, not being able to have a bath and not being able to access publicly funded home birth, not being able to access a known midwife. These things are more systemic in nature, but still have a profound impact on women for the rest of their lives. Even the fact that we estimate that 95 to 99% of Australian women are injected syntocin in the leg as the baby's head and shoulders have been born. The fact that we're not publicly reporting on that is pretty bad. But when you read the package insert for that product, it actually says you really shouldn't be breastfeeding for 12 hours after, because it can cause respiratory distress and allergies in the baby. And postnatal depression increases by 36%. And so if almost all women are having this pharmaceutical, and especially a good chunk of them are having it without consent. I know personally the stranger midwife had started drawing it up, and my obstetrician was like, no, stop, she doesn't want that. And I guess that's when I first learned about, how important continuity is. Even though I might add that obstetrician had no experience in physiological birth, mine was the first one that he'd seen. And so even though I'm all for educating those who want to learn, at no point should I have been coerced by the GP into a private obstetric model based on insurance status. It's just crazy. And so, yeah, every layer of the system is coercive, to the point where I've even lobbied the state education minister asking that the respectful relationships in schools program includes in a healthcare setting. It's not just about domestic and interpersonal and sexual relationships, but healthcare setting, aside from maternity alone, it's really important to talk about consent in those settings.
Eleanor, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Well, I was going to ask about what Asia's advice would be for people who are interested in advocacy, even if it's just like, I don't have much time, but I want to do something, right through to people that are like, great, my kids are a bit older, I want to give back.
Yeah, great question. So again, women don't have to do all these things, but signing up to, Health Consumers Queensland, Maternity Choices Australia, Maternity Consumer Network, Maternal Health Matters, Homebirth Australia, Homebirth Queensland, those sorts of maternity consumer advocacy groups and, consumer groups, following them all on social media might be another idea. So you can just stay up to date with opportunities if you are looking to do paid consumer rep work. But also, yeah, just sending an email to the local state or federal MP. And on MCA's website, we have state and federal briefs where the woman can just take the link, put it in their email and say, hi, this is important to me because I'm attaching the state health brief because you're my state MP. And as per the brief, I would like you to take this to the state health minister and to whether it's the Labor or the Liberal Party caucus and get this moving as a maternal health policy. Can you let me know when it's done? Signed off with the woman's name, number, address. And then if she does want to have a meeting as well, that's when she can say, I'm available during school hours between 9 and 3. She can CC me in, for example, QLD at maternitychoices.org.au. And depending on, again, the level of engagement, whether she's wanting to run the meeting like Amanda did and me just providing that sort of supporting background historical information, or if she's sort of wanting to go on mute initially while I give a bit of background, and then when she's feeling more open to telling the story and why this is important to her, then she can sort of tell the politician, try and get those emotions running about why it's important. And then we just summarize with, okay, these are the asks, such as this Queensland birth strategy, fantastic. However, it's not going to go anywhere unless those targets are in service agreements. There's not a reason why every hospital in Queensland that does maternity services, so that's 39 birthing hospitals, all of them could run publicly funded home birth programs. There is not a reason why that couldn't happen. Same with our federal ask. There is not a reason why Medicare could just be recommended for category A and B. There's no reason C has to miss out. That just is not it's not necessary. And so lobbying the federal MPs for that would be great. And like I said before, doing some media on these things is extremely helpful, and also getting some bulk complaints going. So say you've got a mothers group where 10 of you meet up every Thursday, getting the politician to come to the mothers group meetups, so that way it's 10 women lobbying that politician. They're going to start acting once I start seeing that level of engagement. It's just because, using state politics as an example, so many people complain about traffic and potholes. It's sort of like those issues seem to take up more time because they are more popular, and they get contacted more about those issues. And there's a lot of funding for those issues now, even though the largest health service user group is maternity, and the largest health budget funding is for maternity. The most complaints are for maternity. The most near misses are for maternity. The most insurance payouts, maternity. Most legal cases and professional indemnity claims on maternity professionals for obstetricians. There's no funding for maternity consumer groups, and yet, abortion service user groups or diabetes service user groups get huge amounts of funding. So look, it is really stacked for maternity. And so I guess that's why I like to spend my time doing this, because I feel like there are many injustices in the world and in Australia. However, this one just seems like there are many, many layers of oppression.
Yeah. And I want to add at the end there as well that you don't have to be a certain person to be involved as well. You don't have to be, work in the healthcare sector to volunteer. You don't have to, have a job where you have had experience, in meetings or anything like that. It can all be trained, like coached by Asia or someone else in the field. And, they really want to hear from consumers. And that's for a huge spectrum of consumers. So low income families to highly educated, like it's the spectrum. The main thing is that you are a user of the service, right? That you have had children, that you have an experience to share. And that's really the only prerequisite, right, Age?
Yeah, and I would even say that some maternity consumer advocates have not yet had children when they've started doing this work. And I think that is extremely insightful. That shows you how big the problem is. And I would also just recommend maybe not dressing like a hippie for political meetings.
Asia had
No,
to brief me before. Although I don't think I dressed like a hippie, but you did brief me.
you
But
didn't.
oh.
No, go as your true self, but if possible, leave those rainbow carriers behind. No, totally joking. And and breastfeeding in front of politicians, I've done that a lot. It is really important that motherhood is elevated, because in these spaces it's not. And I had a politician say to me once, oh well, if we had 50% of politicians being female, we would have change. And I just don't fully agree with her, because I still think then motherhood would be devalued. There would be less pregnancy, breastfeeding, talking about maternity services than there needs to be. It would be disproportionate to the issues. despite having met some incredible politicians who, breastfed as a single mum for 3 years, flying into Parliament for sitting weeks. I have really met some incredible politicians there, but even they are scared to go up against their own parties.
Yeah, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. I am hopeful for the future. I think, change is coming and we just need to keep being noisy and yeah, just keep it up.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your
I
time,
agree.
Asia. What a good chat we've had. And also thank you so much for being in our film. That was just so good having your wisdom, all these amazing quotes from you that got put in there, just really hammered in, the statistics and the importance of this issue. So thanks so much for both, for the film, for today, for everything you do.